near the end, we can talk a little bit, have like a QA session for the kids. If that works.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, then I will leave it to you.
Great. Well, thanks so much for inviting me and allowing me to join you via Zoom here today. My name's Tsering, and I am a Superior Court judge here in Clark County, Washington. That means I'm a trial judge, and I hear all types of cases, ranging from family law cases, divorces, child custody cases, all the way to murder, capital crimes, some of the worst crimes you can imagine, rape, murder, assault, um, and civil cases as well, including contract disputes, guardianship cases, eviction cases, and domestic violence cases. So we do hear a wide range of cases as trial court judges. We work with juries as well as hear cases from the bench. And so sometimes I will be the decision maker when it comes to a verdict, and sometimes a jury will be, depending on the type of case and what the litigants decide. And I've been in this role since 2022, when I was appointed by our Washington State governor to take on this role. And I'm really enjoying it. It is very rewarding. It's challenging, as you might imagine, but also really, really rewarding. So I thought I'd share kind of my journey to becoming a judge with all of you to give you an idea of how I became a judge, and then give you maybe some tips, or at least my thoughts on what has helped me in this role or get to this position. And then Tashi was kind enough to send me kind of some bullet points of topics that you all might find interesting, kind of advice I'd give my 16-year-old self, because I think many of you are in high school still. So if that's the case, I'd like to target my comments to things that you all might find helpful. And then certainly want to leave enough time for you to ask questions if you have any, and share my contact information, because one of the things that I'll be stressing and encouraging you to do, which I think based on the other presentations you've heard today or will be hearing today, I'm sure we'll continue this theme of mentorship and connections and networking. And I want to share my information with each of you so that if you ever want to talk privately or in a smaller group, you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to do that. All right, so I am a judge, as I mentioned, here in Washington State. I'm a state court judge, which is different than a federal judge. Federal judges, as you may know and have seen on the news, are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And those positions, generally, most of those are lifetime appointments. And that's really really interesting that the federal system does it that way, and not all states do it that way. There are some states that do lifetime appointments, but not Washington, and I think probably the majority of states don't do that. So as a judge, I'm also an elected official, and I have to seek re-election. Actually, just coming up in May is when I'll be filing for my seat again. So knock on wood, I don't draw a challenger. I didn't the last time, but it's a 4-year term. And the governor, when a vacancy is open because of retirement or resignation or death, the governor will appoint someone to fill out the rest of that term, which is what happened in my case. The judge that held this position retired before his term expired, so I was appointed by the governor. There's also direct election, which is another way. If a judge retires in such a way that the timing lines up with an election, and the judge finishes out their term, then the position becomes open for anyone in the public to run for. And so once you get into the seat and become the incumbent, whether it's through appointment by governor or you ran for that position in a general election, you have to continue to run to maintain that seat. So here in Washington, I am a nonpartisan elected official, meaning I don't have an R, D, or I next to my name. It's just a position without a political affiliation. and judges are subject to rules of a certain code of ethics, and we call those the canons of judicial conduct. And so there's very specific rules from state to state that all judges in state courts have to follow. As you may have seen in the news, one really somewhat, from my position, bizarre but unique part of being a member of our United States Supreme Court is that they don't have the same set of strict ethical rules that many of us lower court judges have to follow. And that's something that you've probably seen in the news and heard about, and maybe that will be changing in the future, but it's something that certainly surprises people when they hear about that. But generally, we're held to a pretty strict ethical code. We not only have to maintain impartiality and independence in our decision making, but you also have to give the appearance of that. And so when you become a judge, it requires you to sometimes change kind of your involvement in certain activities. If you were very politically active before, you have to take a step back from that. If you were, let's say, a public defender or a prosecutor, when you come onto the bench, you might have a short period of time before you can hear those types of cases to get rid of give time to get rid of the conflicts or the appearance of conflicts. I was an assistant attorney general before I became a judge, and so I wasn't able to hear those cases right away. Obviously, those were cases that I may be familiar with, or the type of cases I'd be familiar with, and certainly my former colleagues. And so that's kind of a neat part of being a judge, is you kind of have to shift gears in that way. So my path to the bench is a little unconventional, and I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with typical judicial pathways, but by and large, people are attorneys for a long time, and then they seek a judicial position. Many judges come from a background of being a prosecutor or working in the private sector. And for me, I've got a little bit of both. And so I thought I'd talk about from right about your age, when I was in high school, until I became a judge just a couple years ago. So I started out in high school with a pretty strong desire and goal to become actually a medical doctor. I really had my heart set on becoming a pediatrician and working with children. Really wanted to do something helpful and prestigious, and with Tibetan background, my parents were hoping that I would pursue something with a meaningful career goal, and something that would ultimately make them proud, and obviously fulfill the goal of all their hopes of coming to the US and the sacrifices they made. And so being a doctor seemed like right up there in that kind of line of work. Makes perfect sense. I have cousins who are medical doctors and pursued that path, and very successful. I've seen lots of other Tibetans pursue the medical field, becoming nurses, certified nursing aides, pharmacists. It's obviously demanding work, and really great that so many folks can do that. But I had to come to terms pretty quickly in my college career. So I did a lot of volunteering at hospitals, and I took all the science courses that I thought would be helpful. I worked part-time while in high school. I did volunteer work, as I mentioned, and all of that led me to Dartmouth College, where I did my undergraduate degree. I was far from home because I'm from Washington State, so I went all the way to New Hampshire, and I did the pre-med track, and pretty quickly realized that it was just not for me. One, I have a terrible fear of needles. The sight of blood makes me squirm, and organic chemistry kicked my butt. I was terrible at math. I struggled in sciences, and I found myself going, why am I trying to make this career path work when everything is pointing towards this is not for me. So I had to shift gears and really did not know coming upon graduating from Dartmouth what career path I wanted to ultimately pursue. So the one thing I did know from wanting to become a pediatrician was that I wanted to work with children. I enjoyed working with kids. I liked working with people generally. And so I joined Teach for America, which is an organization that puts usually newly graduated young people into classrooms, low-income classrooms. And so I became a teacher, and I taught 10th grade world history to young people in Oakland, California, and did that for 2 years. It was some of the most challenging work I've ever done, and really, really made me appreciate all of my teachers and all the work that they do, thankless work often. And so, while I was teaching, my students were struggling with the grade level reading material from the textbooks and were unable to use them most of the time. So I had to get creative with lesson planning. And one of the lessons I put together when we were learning about colonialism was to put the British on trial for their actions in India under British rule. And so I turned the classroom into a courtroom. I had half the students become defense attorneys and defend the British, and half of the students became prosecutors and prosecuted what the British did and had to identify, were these crimes, were they excusable? And I made myself the judge because that was fun. And the students really enjoyed the lesson. I enjoyed putting it together and orchestrating it. And that kind of started me thinking about, well, geez, what is it like to be a lawyer? What does the law look like? Is that an option for me? And started asking around and talking to folks, and ended up taking the LSAT, applied to law school, and was fortunate to get in and complete law school. After being a teacher, law school felt, frankly, like a vacation, because all you have to do is read and come to class and learn. And so it was really, I'm fortunate for that timing, because I think if I had just gone to law school right after undergrad, I might not have appreciated all of that and would not have had that perspective. So I did law school, and like many folks, I came out with student debt and needed a realistic solution to pay off that student debt, but still get good legal experience. And so I joined a big law firm, like many people do. It's very lucrative. You can make a lot of money in private law. And so I went to a big law firm, paid off my student debt, and then eventually went back to my public service roots and went to work for the Attorney General's office. And that's where I spent the bulk of my time after law school. I did a variety of, so I worked in a couple of different offices within the Attorney General and represented elected officials. I represented big state agencies like our Washington State retirement systems. I represented the state when it pursued child welfare cases. So for children who were abused and neglected, represented social workers. And so got a lot of good experience there. And then through different organizations you can join as an attorney, bar associations. I got to see what the process looked like to apply to become a judge, because a lot of these positions, the governor's office will want to know, what do the bar associations think of these candidates for judge? So I joined a group that was rating judicial candidates, and I got to see the variety of people who want to become judges. And, I maybe naively thought these were all going to be like the cream of the crop, the best in their field, and we were only going to see really highly motivated, public service oriented individuals. I was right and wrong. There were certainly those folks, but there were also so many people who just thought, okay, it sounds like fun, I want to do it, and it's prestigious, why not? And that shocked me, thinking, oh my gosh, and some of these people were getting appointed. So I thought, geez, I have the same interest, but I have the kind of public service minded background. I'm not doing it for the money. Certainly, I know how to make a lot more money. I made more money in the private sector than I do as a judge, that's for sure. And so thought, why not consider that path? And so I started talking with folks and colleagues who'd done it, and started putting together my application materials. And so that's where kind of that process started. I also want to tell you another theme of my career is kind of persistence is really key. I applied to become a judge, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 5 times before getting it. So I know what rejection feels like. The rejection fatigue can be real, but I think many of you as Tibetans, we know persistence is in our blood, and perseverance certainly. So not letting that deter you is key. You might not get into your first choice college or law school or med school, but you keep going, you do the best you can, and you can, reach any goal you have set for yourself with that mindset. So that's one thing I want to stress as well. And when looking back, I think there were certain things that made that path and make my current job really enjoyable and manageable. I think a couple of things from my public school teaching days. I know how to manage a classroom, so I know how to manage a busy courtroom. You've got to be able to organize lots of different cases and personalities, both the lawyers as well as the litigants. You need to compassionately, kindly share your rulings with people. And almost always, on a good day, you might make 50% of the courtroom happy. On a bad day, you're going to make everybody unhappy because, one side can win, but sometimes nobody wins. A judge can issue a decision that nobody asked for because we're trying to follow the law. And so, sharing and explaining your rulings to people who are often highly emotional, really going through trauma sometimes, right? Like I said, the criminal cases are always very tragic on both sides. Someone's being accused of a crime. Someone is there representing the victims of that crime. There's also, even just in what you'd think was maybe even less stress, divorce case. Someone's marriage has fallen apart. Children need to be, their custody arrangement has to be decided. It's highly, highly emotional, very stressful subject matter. And so how you deliver your decisions is important. And I think for those of us we have who follow the teachings of His Holiness have certainly a leg up. We know about the importance of compassion for our fellow humans, our fellow citizens, community members, and can deliver those messages with that. And even if people are unhappy with my rulings, they understand them, they understand how I got there. And I think that's really important and something that makes us as candidates for judicial office or becoming a lawyer, Tibetans uniquely positioned to do this type of work. And I think if I look back to my younger self, I would not be so stressed out about having it all figured out. I think even before I reached high school, I kind of had this mindset of I need to have a career goal. I need to have something at the end of this tunnel of education that's going to be something I can be proud of, my parents can be proud of. And when you're that young, and I think when I grew up, it was not the internet age. And so I did not have access to a lot of the tools that are available today to see. I couldn't just Google, what does it look like to be a pediatrician? What does it look like to be an archaeologist? What does it look like to be an environmental attorney? So kind of going off popular culture, television and media, whatever I could get my hands on, people who talk to, didn't really know the wide variety of careers that were out there. Certainly didn't even consider a legal career when I was in high school, middle school and high school. So I think keeping your mind open is really important, and not letting yourself succumb to the pressure of, gosh, well, I always said I was going to become, a nurse practitioner, and now I really want to become, a paleontologist or whatever it is, and not being able to shift gears. Is I would encourage you not to be so rigid that you can't shift gears. And I think if your career path changes, that's okay. I'm one example of that. My career path changed many times. My career goals changed many times. But some things you can do that will help in that process is to keep track of all of your achievements and your accolades, any awards you get, any programs you participate in, internships. Keep track of all your contacts. That means, whether it's a colleague or a supervisor or a coach, stay in contact with people who can speak highly of you. They will in the future be your references. I think that's great. They can also provide mentorship, guidance. They'll think of you when opportunities arise and let you know about those. And then I think it's also important to, try new things, especially at this age. You have an opportunity to see what's out there. Really, anything is open to you. And if you have the option or a opportunity to shadow someone in a field where you think you're interested in pursuing, I encourage you to do that. Had I known that being a doctor meant, you were going to have to do a lot of administrative work. I have a cousin who's a pediatrician, and all of the paperwork that comes after you do your patient rounds, I think it looks like maybe 50-50, if not more time doing administrative paperwork. Maybe I would have given that a second thought. Or, what's it like to deliver, some tragic medical news to a patient? Think about things like that. Or if you want to become a lawyer, what does that look like? Are you in the courtroom every single day? Are you working with clients most of the time? Are you negotiating deals? What type of attorney do you want to be? Do you want to be a business attorney, drafting contracts? Do you want to be a prosecutor, making plea deals? So there's lots of, even within each field, there's so many different avenues to take. And so if you have that opportunity to shadow somebody, I encourage you to do it. I think in DC and Maryland and Virginia, you all have a really strong network of Tibetans and professionals in the area. And so you probably already have that connection, but if not, feel free to, I tell this story all the time that when I came back to practice law in Washington, I just went to the state bar's website and started typing in Tibetan names in the lawyer directory. It was like, how many sittings are there? Okay. Oh, there's another sitting in Washington State. There's an attorney. How many Tenzis are there? How many Bemas, Doma, Sonam? I put every type of Tibetan name I could think of just so I could start, tracking and cold calling folks and trying to see who else is out here and doing the work. And then build your network that way and keep track of those contacts. One of the notes that Tashi sent me was one that said, what would you, if you could go back, what would you tell yourself, or any advice you'd give yourself? One, I would certainly say, please be kinder to your parents. They're working hard. And when you're older, like myself, and become a parent, you'll be happy that you were kinder to your parents at this stage. It's stressful for you all thinking about college and careers. It's also stressful for them, and they're just, wanting to support you. I think if you have the ability to work while you're in school, I think that is wonderful. It can be stressful too, because you're stretched pretty thin with sports and extracurriculars and homework. But I think keeping yourself busy, keeping yourself engaged, and giving yourself that perspective is really, really important, because I think that's one of the things I was proud of. I think once I hit 14, I started working at least part-time. I worked in the summers at a county fair locally here, making like corn dogs and elephant ears. I think it was like $4.50 an hour. Um, was like big money for me back then. It was enough money to buy school clothes come the next year. And so I was really, proud that I could do that work, and then continued working like as a grocery store courtesy clerk, getting those shopping carts back into the store and bagging groceries for people. And then, so whatever type of work it is, whether it's flipping burgers or anything, I think that gives you a good perspective. You'll have that work ethic to drive you. You won't have time for the activities or networks of that could get you in trouble, right? So stay out of trouble if you can. And then if you do get into trouble, know that that doesn't have to define you. One of my rotations is a juvenile rotation. So we see juvenile criminal cases where some young people get themselves into some pretty serious trouble, but it really doesn't have to define them. They can come out of that and you can learn from it. But if you can avoid that to begin with, that is key, because it will have an impact on what opportunities are available to you. And so let's see here. I think if you all get an opportunity to practice some interviewing, that's great too, even if with just each other, pair up and try that. I think that's really helpful. When I was applying for colleges, the alumni network would offer alumni interviews and give feedback to the admissions office. If that's still available and being done, I'd encourage you to do that. That was really something that helped me. My alumni interviewer actually became an advocate for me and helped fund a plane ticket for me to go visit the college and consider it after I got admitted, and to see if I could actually go there. Let's see, job interviews, practice those. And I think, one thing that I would tell you that you might not realize right now is that even at 16, 15, 17, even as teenagers, you are currently building your network. It feels like it might be more of a social network right now, but it can and likely will become your professional network too. Your colleagues or your classmates are part of that group. Your teachers are part of that group, mentors, bosses, coaches, all these folks who can vouch for you, be a reference for you. I have a colleague who actually I met in seventh grade, and kind of kept tabs with, became a prosecutor, and then applied through election to become a judge and went through that process. And so when I was going through this, I was able to call him and say, hey, what was that like for you? And so that was nice to be able to call somebody that I'd known since we were, pimply faced 15-year-olds and ask, what was that process like? Share any tips you have. And so building that network, you all know, being kind to people, not just because that's who we are and what we do as Tibetans, but also because, people remember. One thing that shouldn't be surprising, but was to a lot of folks who applied to become judge, is that the governor's office or whatever appointing authority picks the judge will call your references, but not only the people that you list as people who you think will speak kindly of you, about you, but they'll call your opposing counsel. So they'll call all the people you had to go up against and say, were they professional? Were they courteous? Were they kind? Did they act and behave ethically? All of those things. And so even people who are not interested in the same goal as you, or who may even be opposite you, I think showing them that kindness is important too. And being known for that, your reputation will follow you. So building that now, I think, is important. And I think before I ramble off too much longer, I want to make sure we have time for questions. Tashi, do you have folks there that have already submitted questions, or want to see if anybody has anything live there? through Zoom or in the building you're in there.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so we do have some questions prepared, but I think before that, we should just open up to the floor if you guys have any questions, that you thought of while she gave her, presentation. And it doesn't have to be, it can be everyone, right? We'll do with that. So let's make it interactive. Like, what kind of questions, or not even questions, just any kind of comments you guys have, feel free to speak up. So yeah, I'm sorry.
Why'd you choose to like branch out to a judge rather than like staying in like the private lawyer sector for a little bit longer to make more money?
That's a good question. Sometimes I ask myself that when I look at my paycheck. Well, so there's a number of reasons. One, while it was very fun and you're in your 20s, you're making more money than I've ever seen in my life. It was exciting. You got to pay off your debt, treat your family and your parents to some nice trips and things. Thinking about the long-term, implications of becoming a partner or working in that practice, I started to think about work-life balance a little bit more. In addition to just, do I really want to work for a firm that represents BP after the oil spill and you see every day on the news what is going on and coming up with white collar crime, strategies to help your clients get out of paying settlements or, so there's the kind of moral piece of this that weighs a little bit. Not to say that everyone's not entitled to a vigorous defense, but there's that piece of it. There's kind of, do I get fulfillment from representing corporate clients only, or where do I get the most fulfillment? And when I was in private practice, the days I would wake up and go, I can't wait to go to work, were when I was doing my pro bono asylum work or my pro bono nonprofit organization work. And that's when I found myself the happiest. And it's also a little bit of that work-life balance. Do I really enjoy getting calls from partners at 2 a.m. in the morning, being asked to come back to the office to work on something until 8 a.m., go take a nap, and then come back for a 10 a.m. meeting? No. Or, being young and single, you were going to work every Thanksgiving and every Christmas until you have enough political capital to get one of those holidays off, or constantly having to bail on your significant other or your friends when deals and work comes up. So it was a little bit of that, thinking through, do I ever want to have a family? How am I going to manage that? Maybe there are ways to make that work. I had friends who, got married and had partners that were able to stay at home or had more flexible careers and could do that and help balance that out. But I found myself wanting a more manageable work-life balance. And that came at, a pretty hefty financial price tag, but I felt like I saved enough. When I was making that corporate law firm money, I wasn't living like that, not all the time anyway. I was kind of still living like a law student so that I could pay everything off. And I mean, I did buy myself a nice car and, take some nice trips, but I also put enough away so that I could buy a house and, do the things I needed to do that made it so when I took the big pay cut to join the private sector, I mean, from the private sector to the public sector, it wasn't as big of a shock. So if you have a plan, I think that helps.
And a follow-up question I have is, so you got into the private sector right after law school, and how long were you in the private sector before you made that leap over?
What was the last part? How long?
Yeah, how long were you in the private sector before you made the leap? How many years? And yeah.
A little over 3.
And how would you compare your time now being in the public sector, which is less money, but working more for the people versus working in private? Do you feel it more being more fulfilling? How would you compare that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pro bono work I did at the law firm was amazing, and those cases still stick with me, right? I think about them often, those clients, and that type of work. But that was just like a very small bit of what I had to do. Now I interact with, and even when I was at the Attorney General's office, I saw the impacts of my work, daily, regularly. I knew that, we were keeping children safe by protecting abused and neglected kids. Whether, and even, working for representing larger state agencies, like the retirement systems, making sure that public employee pensions were secure and protected. And, you've got that sense of working for the public good. And I think, there's not a limit to the pro bono piece of this, because as a public attorney working at the AG's office, I still did pro bono work. I represented undocumented immigrants in contract disputes, represented low-income clients who needed eviction help. So there's still the opportunity to do that when you feel like, oh, I'm representing this big state agency. I want to feel more kind of down to earth and personal. You have those opportunities as well. And then certainly now as a judge, I see the litigants every day. I'd say anecdotally about 70% of the people who need to have their case heard by a judge or jury are not able to afford attorneys. So they're trying to figure this out on their own. They don't have legal counsel. And so the court really plays a big role in ensuring that they understand what's being expected of them, what the rules are, how the law works. And so I get to work with people every day in that regard.
Yeah, let's tater around. Other questions that you guys may have? And you can go again, the parents as well, please. And anyone in the Zooms as well, Karma, Gunsel, if you guys have any questions for Judge Tsering.
I was wondering, like, how lucrative would you say like the private sector is in terms of like opportunities and exit opportunities and pay wise?
Well, so I have not kept up with, I should mention one other thing. So my private sector colleagues, when I was at the Attorney General's office, so I jumped in doing litigation and immediately got to first chair my own cases, do depositions, argue summary judgment motion in court. And my counterparts at the law firm had still never stepped foot into a courtroom, because that's what partners do, not junior associates. So you've got to grind a little longer, or significantly longer if you take that law firm route, if you're interested in litigation and getting in the courtroom, compared to public sector attorneys who are in there on day one. And so, but in terms of salaries, I have not kept up, but I mean, this is 20 years ago, but dated information. First year associates made coming out of the gate in California and New York, $160,000 salary, right? Just before bonus. So that's what, 2 decades ago. Like, you can imagine where it is now. And so, right, you might become a judge 20 years later and never make what you made as a junior associate once you factor in your bonus. So it's very lucrative. It can be very lucrative. It's also highly competitive. If that's the route you're interested in going, the one big piece of advice I have for you is get straight A's in law school. That is kind of one of the key determinants of where you can land a summer internship, summer legal associate fellowship. If you can do that, I did that my first year summer and my second year summer in between law school, and you get paid what the first year associates get paid in the summer to work at these firms. And essentially it's like a, 8-week, 10-week interview where they get to see what kind of work you might do for them. And they're also trying to woo you and recruit you. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, get straight A's or as close to straight A's as you can. Interview very well. They want people who can, you can't just get straight A's and then not know how to talk to people, because the private sector is all about building your book of business. And eventually, if you want to become a partner at these firms, you need to be able to attract and retain clients. And so being able to network, build a good relationship with the partners and attorneys that are already there, the staff, as well as your clientele.
And then Karma, I see your hands up. Do you want to
Mhm.
come off mute and ask her a question?
Yeah, I have a question. What was like one of your most like hardest or like scariest like trials you had before?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see. Well, so I'll give you kind of a couple of examples. Scary in terms of I feared for not only my own safety, my courtroom staff safety, and the other litigants. When you're dealing with someone who we see a confluence of a lot of issues that are prevalent in our community, including drug addiction, so substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental health. And we had a child custody case where a parent had all three of those issues and was in court demanding, that they get the outcome that they want. They had already admitted to, and the other side had already submitted horrific evidence of the abuse suffered at the hands of this individual. And so, one, worrying about keeping the litigants safe was something that I was very concerned about. And two, keeping my clerk and my courtroom staff safe, and then of course myself. And so some of the things you can do are you let security know in advance, right? I know the fact pattern before we go to trial. I've seen this individual in court before because we've had readiness hearings or motions hearings, seen them explode, seen them say, fuck you, judge, and run out, and then come back and say, I'm sorry, so you can see this very erratic behavior. And it's all about, keeping your cool, keeping your head on, and still approaching them with respect and kindness. They're going through obviously a lot, but safety is number one. So I let our deputies know they're there in the courtroom with us. I let the other party know that I encouraged them to join the trial by Zoom. It's their right to be there in person, but I said, I really encourage you to consider Zoom. It's an option. So thankfully they took me up on that offer and joined by Zoom at an undisclosed location so that they could be safe. I issued a preliminary ruling, and then I said, I will give my detailed ruling in writing. It'll be mailed to you, right? So that way no one has to be physically there to get the decision, because it was not going to go in his favor, but at least it gives people time to cool off. They get to feel like, their case was heard. And so sometimes those cases come up with some frequency where you have those issues come together. There's also just tragic cases, child abuse cases where you almost, it's like secondary trauma sometimes to hear about children, an 18-month-old left at home for a 3-day weekend where the parents went on a drug bender, intentionally left the baby in the little living room, sprinkled Cheerios around the baby, and left for 3 days. That's anytime you hear about that, especially if you have young children yourself, you can't imagine what was going through someone's mind to to allow them to do that. And then the trauma that those children encounter. Child sex abuse is the worst. Those cases they haunt you a little bit because it's kind of just unspeakable things. So you do encounter sometimes the worst of our community and society, but there are also moments that are really encouraging. Parents who come out of drug addiction to better themselves and take care of their children who, despite whatever upbringing they may have, doing really great things. You see that in the adoption cases and the guardianship cases, family members stepping up to care for each other. So there are really nice moments as well.
Okay. And then before we open up, we're gonna do one more question from the document, just so we can move around. So one of the questions that were pre-prepared from one of the mentors is we recently did a like a personality kind of a session last learning event last month, just to get the kids an idea of being self-aware in their strengths, their weakness, who they are. And so the question is like, who would be suited for a career in law? And other than private sector and public sector, there are other fields in law that we don't know about that are potentially there.
Yeah. Okay. So personality type, I think really it depends on what type of law you go into. So if you are really rigid and you like very strict parameters and guidelines, regulatory law, environmental law, things like that might be right up your alley. If you are more a people person and you want to, you enjoy hearing the facts, the story, what someone's, gone through, hearing about what their hopes are in terms of outcome and finding a way to get there. Family law might be right up your alley. Immigration law could be up your alley. And if you really like debate and arguing, appellate law, right? Arguing in front of a court of appeals or the Supreme Court, that type of law might be something for you. If you, like the variety of one day you're doing a case that involves, a guilty plea and making sure somebody's constitutional rights are upheld. And when you enter that guilty plea, and another day you're doing an eviction case, and then the next day you're helping some people get a divorce, you might want to become a judge because that's the variety and mix of things we do. And so I think it really does take all types. I think the one common theme probably is that you really do, if you can, build up your speed reading skills. That will help you if you can do that in high school and college. Reading is something, thousands of pages a week. I'm reading a lot because there's just so many. As a judge anyway, the pleadings, everybody gets their say, and so they submit paperwork pleadings to you. You read that to be knowledgeable what their position is, and then oral argument in court is just kind of the highlights, but you've already done all the work and read and likely made up your decision before the argument happens in court. Now, trial is entirely different because you're putting on witness testimony and all of that, so that's a different skill set too. Yeah. And then, sorry, what was the second part of that? So that was the personality piece.
Yeah, that was it. The different types of variety in the field
Oh,
of law.
yeah. Yeah, and there's lawyers who never go into the courtroom. They just negotiate deals. Lawyers who do patent work, registering patents and trademarks and things like that. It is really wide variety. Malpractice law, if you become a doctor and then want to become an attorney, you'd be highly sought after for that type of work. Yep.
And then we have about 5 minutes, and then we'll do like one or two more questions. And you had a question.
I have one question. Can I ask?
Yeah.
What are some of the strengths or qualities that you need to have to be able to be like a judge?
Well, I think once you're in the position, being patient. You've got to be very patient because it can take several times explaining the process, and you may be explaining it the exact same way to multiple people multiple times a day. I think your communication skills have to be great because you're not only talking to very sophisticated attorneys who, are specialists in their field, but you're also talking to regular people, sometimes people who don't have a high school education, and trying to explain very complex legal concepts and rulings to them. And they need to be able to understand your rulings so they can follow them, follow the law. So communication skills are important, and time management, not only for your own workload, but in the courtroom. We have dockets where we hear, in a span of 3 hours, I have to hear 40 cases. So I need to be managing my time, deciding when to call what case, deciding how long to give each side, being very clear, right? If you tell somebody at the beginning, each of you gets 3 minutes to highlight what the most important parts of your case are. I've already read everything you've submitted, so you don't have to go over everything, but you can use these 3 minutes to highlight something or to give me an update. And everybody will get the same exact amount of time. If you tell them that at the outset, they don't feel shorted when you let somebody go a little bit longer or cut them off. Or if you do need to let somebody go longer, and then you say, okay, I've given you 30 extra seconds, so the other side gets that too. And then you keep an eye on your time. And so, yeah, those are kind of helpful skills to have once you're in the job.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have one quick question before we end it off. Any quick questions? All right, then if not, I'll send Judge contact into the group chat. So if you guys have any questions or if you want to connect, I'll forward it to everyone. Yeah.
Another quick question. What do you think of corporate lawyers?
Well, having been one before, I think highly of them. But like in every field and in every profession, it's highly person specific, right? There's some that are great at what they do, highly ethical, really strong work ethic as well. And others where, and this is why when I mentioned protect your reputation, because that is key, right? Whatever field you're in, whatever work you do, your reputation will follow you. And if you cut corners on one case and, you sign something that is, and in the age that you all are growing up with Chat GPT, you use Chat GPT to write one essay or one legal brief, and you will be forever known as that attorney who got sanctioned $5,000 by the, Northern District in New York, Southern District of New York, and will be very challenging for any judge to just take wholesale what you're telling them in your legal briefs. They'll read everything twice, 3 times. And so that's important. I have some attorneys that appear before me. If they put it in a legal brief, I know 100% when I look up that case, it's going to say what it says, what they say it says. There are other attorneys, I read every case they cite because I don't know if they've really read what they're telling me that they're putting on there. So your reputation is important.
Okay, then I think we can wrap it off. Thank you so much, Judge Tsering Cornell, for
Great.
joining us. And then
Thanks, everyone.
contract. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.